Hog 2.6, a comprehensive guide to the most popular cycle deck by Gaming with Charlie, part 2. Tip number 13. If you place your Hog Rider and your opponent shows a pattern of using Cannon, Tesla, or other building to counter the Hog Rider, you can place a Predictive Fireball, a Preemptive Fireball to take down the building and also allow your Hog Rider to get to the enemy tower. Tip number 14. The same thing goes with Skarmy or Goblin Gang. If your opponent shows a pattern of using Skarmy or Goblin Gang to counter the Hog Rider, you can place a preemptive log, a prediction log, if you say. Tip number 15. Fireball can be used to destroy clumped up units for a positive elixir trade, as Orange Juice Gaming would say. So basically, try to fireball enemy troops when they're all clumped up for massive value. Fireball can bring you a ton of value. And also keep in mind that the pushback effect of Fireball can be used to reset Inferno Dragon's charge, or to just force enemy troops to, stall some time. So Fireball is really useful. Tip number 16. Use Ice Golem to kite enemy troops, giving your towers more time to destroy them. Ice Golem is also great for distracting enemy troops if you have a musketeer or, cannon. Tip number 17. If your opponent pushes both lanes, sometimes it might be a good idea to use Ice Golem to counter them, to force your enemy troops into one lane, such as the Witch and Elite Barbarian double lane push into one lane. Tip number 18. Tank and spank with Ice Golem and Skeletons. Basically, Ice Golem is great for tanking, and then Skeletons can do some great damage for one elixir. And this is a great standard counter technique, basically, for most pushes. As you can see in this example, there's a Ice Golem and Musketeer, and I counter them just like that. And this is also really useful if if the enemy troops have some tank or something. So in this example, the Skeletons took down the Wizard and the Bowler. And the Skeletons and Ice Golem are really good for tank and spank. It's a really cheap counter. Tip number 19. Tank and spank with cannon. Same thing goes with Ice Golem, except in this case you should use your cannon as the main damage source, and then use your Ice Golem as the distraction, and also use Skeletons as distraction. Ice Golem is a really good 2-elixir tank. Tip number 20. If you wanna counter, let's say, a big enemy troop with a bunch of troops behind it, same thing, it's this tank and spank method, it's really useful. And also cannon can do massive damage and also lure your enemy troops into range of both of your towers. Tip number 21. So basically, I've shown you a few examples of how defense could cost drastically less elixir than offense. It could be much cheaper to defend from a push than your opponent spent elixir in countering it. So tip 21 is, if your opponent prepares a large snowball push in the back, try rushing the opposite lane. Since your opponent wouldn't have much elixir, this would force your opponent to defend with cheap troops, and this also forces your opponent to break up their push, so it's easier to counter them. Rather than your opponent placing a bunch of troops behind the Mega Knight or Golem or Giant to support a large push, you've just forced your opponent to split their push in half. Tip number 22, tip number 23, and tip number 24. Understand how a cheap cycle control archetype works. Hog 2.6 is a cycle deck, a cheap control archetype. So you should place your Hog Rider, and if it gets countered, you could quickly cycle back to your Hog Rider and then place it again, faster than your opponent can cycle to their counter. Hog Rider is about making a series of small pushes to gradually chip down your enemy's towers, rather than one big push. And unlike beatdown decks, you should care about tower damage. Even a tiny bit of tower damage matters. Care about every little bit. Tip number 25, you can use cannon to lure an enemy balloon into range of both towers. Tip number 26, right as you start the battle, it's important to charge at the opponent tower if you have your Hog Rider in hand. Because your opponent likely wouldn't be prepared, your opponent likely wouldn't be ready to defend. So if you have your Hog Rider in your starting hand, quickly charge at your opponent. They would not be prepared, they wouldn't expect it, and they wouldn't defend well, and then you can quickly counter whatever counter push they throw back at you. So anyways, this is it for this video. Please like and subscribe. If you've made it to the end of this video, this means you definitely enjoyed it. So please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, turn on the bell icon to never miss another upload, leave a comment telling me what you thought, and stay tuned for part 3 of the Hog 2.6 Cycle Deck guide, comprehensive guide. But anyways, this has been Charlie. Until next time, take care.